governance and social justice. So the formations need to start coming up, and people need to decide exactly what is the agenda, because every election brings with it an agenda. The previous one was from the haves and the have-nots. We find a balance, take from city, give to do, so that you and I can be in the equilibrium. That is not working very well. I think we need an agenda for the next election. And in my opinion, where I stand, I think there's going to be an economic equation. So we need persons who can drive that. We need to understand exactly what is the economics and the role of myself as a citizen of this country, as a taxpayer. What is my role? What is my civic duty? And how do I ensure that my rights from when I pay to expectation of service delivery from the government, what is my role and how do I ensure that I'm able to realize that? We are, of course, going to have a political parties formation. That is, these are vehicles. But I yearn for a day where we will have political parties that are ideological in nature and not just mass movement to vote out and vote in a person. Because that's where we have been falling short. But if I knew that City and Company is a party that stands for this and that agenda, then when I subscribe my membership to that political party, because I want to believe we are all members of political parties if we have voted before.
I am actually not a member.
You have refused to be one.
I
by
joined
choice.
a political party a while, some decades ago.
Yes.
I even paid membership fees for a year. And that was that. But I'm not a member of any political party.
And the reason you'd realize is because you realize there is no particular agenda, there are no principles that you are subscribing to. It's just a movement to get some people into office. So this time round, we must come back into ourselves and ask ourselves, what really do we want to see? So of all these characters who are vying for office, whom can we really begin to trust? And do we have a say in our political parties? Because
But let me ask you this question.
Yes.
It's something that we keep raising in the show. Looking for these individuals who we feel are trustworthy and who we can entrust the welfare of the country to. If you look at the turnover of political leadership in this country, it's high. Some parts of the country is higher than others. In fact, you can almost tell, 2/3 of these people gone, you know. And the people we replace them with are usually people who we believe are going to be better, only for them to be exactly the same. And this happens over and over. There are exceptions to the rule. But have we had an honest conversation with ourselves as citizens about this and saying, look, folks, did we abdicate our role in ensuring that the leaders do what they're supposed to do? Or did we assume that because we have elected them, they will do what they're supposed to do? Because there seems to be an atmosphere of temptation that exists in our country, which started off as a culture. It's now entrenched as part and parcel of who we are, where it is normalized for you to be engaged in some form of corruption if you're in leadership. It's also normal for you to try as much as possible to amass as much money as you possibly can from government coffers. And we have accepted that you can be rich by simply stealing from the people.
Please add in the shortest time possible.
Yes, so it's a temptation that exists, and it's a growth industry because we do not see any penalty. We do not see people, any reprisal. We do not see any situation where people who have disadvantaged the people who voted for them being held to book. We don't see it.
very true. And why? Violation of the rule of law.
This one, I take blame as among the people who does not hold the leadership to account. This one is not these people, it is me. Because if we thought it didn't work, just go back to June. Go back to that date and then look at the week and the weeks that followed for a period and see what happened. People were held to account and told, we're not putting up with this. Peacefully.
Yes.
They reacted violently, but they were told. And we saw something that we never thought we would see, but we saw it and we keep referring to it. Some people think the moment was lost. I think actually no. The moment is etched in our minds. Why are we afraid to hold our leaders to account at the very local list, if I may use that word, of levels, and telling them, this isn't working.
This can't work.
And you are creating a mess, you.
And we all across the board seem to understand that that is the way that's going to get people to pull their socks up and do the right thing.
Yes.
But for some reason, we don't.
Yes.
If we can see the solution, if we can see that this is an avenue to a solution, but we choose not to go down that road, then who's to blame?
And then the difficult discussions, such as the one that Jimmy Wanjigi has brought over and over again about this matter of odious debt. And sometimes he even calls it a heist, where you're being told this is what you owe, and you're saying, for us to owe this money, these are the processes that our laws allow us to follow. If we owe and we didn't follow those rules, we as a citizenry, we don't owe that money.
We don't.
The people who borrowed it are the ones who owe that money, not us. The government cannot transfer, the government of the day, to the state, which is us, what it is they borrowed for, what only they understand. See, it is a discussion. Because with that discussion comes to the burden we have of repayment. That burden prohibits us from doing anything that we are supposed to do.
True.
And given that we have that burden and we are paying, it tells you we actually have money. But we use that money to pay. And yet, we all acknowledge that we do not see where all that money went. We actually don't.
And you see, City, critical as well is fact that all these are debts that you keep on taking. There's always some form of documentation that accompanies it. And to table some of this documentation, to tell Kenyans, this is the document that we use to borrow this much and this is how much you borrowed, have never been released to the public, even when the current government, while campaigning, said we will give you the document, e.g. SGR.
Well, I mean, we saw the other day that a case in which a number of parties had taken a petition to court, Wajiro Gikonyo and some other concerned citizens. The court actually came back with a ruling and said you must actually make the debt register you must bring it up to date, and you must tell people, you must make it public then what these debts essentially have been taken for. I mean, that was landmark. It's huge. The question as to whether that is actually going to happen is a whole different kettle of fish. But that to see, and are these not some of the things that we talk about, to see that there are concerned citizens, that there are interested parties who come out and say, no, we're going to fight tooth and nail until some of these things are actually made known. Yeah. You've said on several occasions, CT, that if you essentially take what would be the livelihoods of citizens out of their mouths, off their backs, it's akin to genocide. It is genocide. Thorough abrogation of human rights.
It's a crime against humanity.
So should we then not be equally involved when it comes to making sure that some of these things are overturned, or at the very least, implemented in the manner in which they ought to be? You
see, the discussion that we have as Kenyans amounts to complaints and whining. Oh, they've done this. The other day, but now you look at what they brought. And just when we thought it was safe, now even cows. Now it's what we do. And when we do this, it becomes a routine that removes our focus from what we should be looking at. We actually have enough money in this country to run our business. Simple fact.
Yep.
So why are we borrowing? Look at the leap. You only need to look at what it is that President Kibaki left in terms of what we owed. And then you look at, by the time we're getting to 2022, how much the Uhuru government had borrowed. When I talk about a leap of some 4 trillion shillings, that's not a little money. Yeah. There should be a corresponding development worth 4 trillion that you can witness. Now, what that usually means in an economy, it means that economy should have grown by 4 trillion.
Yes.
Which means all the things we keep talking about should have happened. We would be genuinely that middle class thing that we keep talking about.
Yes.
But unfortunately, we seem to be getting poorer. Meaning the citizenry are getting poorer. The services that we're supposed to get are becoming more and more abject. How do you have a debt, and yet the debt was intended for development and to make your lives better, and your lives are getting worse? Surely something isn't right here, is it?
For goodness sake, if you take a loan to construct a road, just as an example, you take a loan to construct a road, then you take that budget, one would assume, and you say from that money we are going to give it to CT Muga and Sons to construct 100 kilometers of said road. They go ahead and do the road, but then CT Muga and Sons is not paid. So then I have a problem reconciling with that. If you put leave alone trillion. If you put 100 million shillings into somewhere, you're going to feel it. It will shake you somehow. For example, you will see that doctors who called off their strike this last week, you will see that there will be money to pay them according to a CBA. You will see that there will be money to hire teachers. These 20,000 teachers at TSE have been threatening us that they're going to hire.
Classes.
Then you would build classrooms, the 16,000 that are needed by January 6th in 2 weeks from now. You would see that, for example, this enterprise road would be finished after 15 years. You would see that you would be able to build schools in far off places, like that picture that we see every day as a reminder that things are not working. If you put 100 million
shillings.
It is true.
would you not? You would see it. You would see it.
Just consider, take it to the domestic level and ask yourself, what is an average salary for most families? And look at what they do with it.
KNBS told us that the people who earn 50,000 shillings and below are in the majority.
Yes. And those people live in this city, and they go to the same places to buy things as everybody else. All right?
Yes.
That money caters for transport, for rent, for food, for
fees,
everything.
health,
Everything. It is managed. Now, we can see children grow up, they go to university. That same money helps pay for fees in the university. That same amount of money. Meaning, parents juggle, join circles, they do everything, but they do it. Now, we have a country. We know how much money we raise.
Increase taxes.
Something happened in the COVID era, something very strange that we don't often talk about. President Uhuru was still president. President Uhuru lowered taxes. I'm saying it generally. Do you know what happened? We started collecting more money. COVID. There were budget estimates. We were meeting it. Strange, we were. Now, what does it tell you? A government comes in and does the complete opposite, and you're saying, you know, this thing hasn't worked anywhere on this planet. So, what do you think we are going to... what makes us so different that you think that this sort of thing is at least suddenly going to work in our country? And it hasn't worked. It's something that has been debunked so many times. And yet, someone insists that this is what you must do. And in order to do this, you're being told we must borrow more. And the problems that we said we had, for which we assume we were borrowing, are not going anywhere. So, again, holding people to account is something that many political leaders who love impunity find uncomfortable. But it must be done.
It must be done.
Yes, because the money we're talking about is not your money, it is our money.
Yeah.
So it is not wrong if I ask you what you're doing with my money. I mean, I gave it to you to do something with, and I was specific about what I wanted, and I agreed. Now you're not doing it. Surely, should I not ask you what you're doing with my money?
Which way?
Well, we need deliberate involvement as citizens. Because as you rightly say, this is our country, it is our money, it is our expectation in terms of development. It is not proper anywhere in the world to borrow money for development, come initiate a project, have a contractor on site, they complete the task, they are not paid, but the money has left the account.
Yes.
That is theft. That's a haste.
It
We are
is.
talking about.
It is criminal.
It is criminal.
Yeah.
The odious debt we are talking about. Well and truly, we borrowed for SGR, we've done the expressway, and many other projects. But at what point does the government sit down and decide, I'm not going to show you the receipts, the documents, the contract,
And yet I want you to pay for it.
and I want you to pay for it?
And
remember,
these are public documents.
Yes, every Kenyan today owns almost to the range of 300,000. Whether you are young, new, born yesterday, or you be born tomorrow, you owe. And you're expected to pay that money. And yet, the person that borrowed is not willing to disclose the public document to, at least for your comfort, to know this is where my money went. The recent was the airport. A public document that could not be exposed. Why? So that's why I'm saying, City, deliberate public involvement of citizens on the choices that we are making. We don't have to wait until 2027 because we have a finance bill that is coming up. Remember, they're in the budget making process.
Started
already.
in September.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the process is ongoing. We have to keep checking. We do not have a choice. The question of odious debt will be answered. in time, in good time. And I hope people like Jimmy Wajigi will keep the conversation going.
No, Jimmy is one person. Other people.
Then other people need to join. The formations now needs to come up. I pity one fellow, senior counsel Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, because he has remained ambivalent over the years. I think he is not willing to let go of the watermelon tag. Look at him. He came out and he started supporting the Gen Z revolution. Good for him, good for the country. He continues to agitate for constitutionalism, and respect for the rule of law. But the coalition is in government. He has refused to leave Azimio. You look at him, he continues to be a beneficiary of the Azimio coalition that he's saying we are not going into government, because one of his members of parliament is a deputy speaker, Farah Maalim. So at what point will these persons who are yearning to lead the country come out and say, indeed, I'm going to stand with the people? And this time round, the people left the government. The people want a person they can sit down, interrogate, have a conversation, and drive an agenda together. There is no room for ambivalence. It is either you are with the movement, the revolution, the people, the call for good governance and social justice, or you want to continue being a beneficiary of this regime.
And you talk about movement, and the Gen Z revolution showed us that it can be done. But with that as well came the government that pushed back. People were abducted, people were killed. Questions are being raised and no one is giving this information. In terms of, as we sit in this room, we say the people should come and hold the governments that be to account. But there's fear that has been created because we buy these bullets only to shoot us.
But fear will always be with us. There is no government on this planet that does not push back when people hold them to account. We don't have laws because people are good. If we were good, we wouldn't need laws. We just good ourselves into being. But we are not good. Our inclination is to do things that please us at the expense of others. So you have laws which provides us with a commonality, something that everybody can refer to, because it's now what makes you equal as you were by design and by creation. But I think we've been traumatized for too long, to the point where we identify with our tormentor far too easily.
Yes.
And we even protect them, and we even justify what they do on their behalf.
I opined on the issue of slavery earlier on.
Yes.
It's the slaves who sustained slavery, in a manner of speaking.
Yes, they did.
It's the same thing we are in. For too long, the indoctrination that the government is here to say, and we must abide to that, is what has been happening. But the Gen Z protest set us on a revolution whereby we know that we, the people, it is possible, we can transform this country. And that's the spirit that we want to keep on, flaming. Because, and it's picking up. If you look even across Africa, there's a lot of changes that are happening. We had Senegal bring in a very young president, straight from prison to presidency. We had South Africa, for the first time in a long time, almost in South Africans' man's entire history, ANC did not make government.
The majority that they've had was lost. They went into a coalition.
Exactly. So these are the things that the neo-African, because we've spoken about the Pan-Africanism for far too long, and it has been a good foundation for liberation of our continent from the colonizers. But now, neo-Africanism, the modern African, who is you and I, who is learned, who is informed, who pays taxes, who has an agenda for the development of his own family, his own person, his own community, we have a plan, and we must, for our own continent. Because the Africa is the future. And if Kenya is the hub of Africa, how can we be lagging behind? How can we be making regressive moves on democracy, on constitutionalism, on taxation, on human rights?
How do we allow the leadership that we have elected to regress us?
In 10 seconds.
I mean, it's a catch-22. Because at one point, you vote for me in anticipation that I'll represent you. Because the first role is representation. But then, remember, we have a very incompetent parliament. And
Really
You've made
mildly.
CT's weekend.
Put it really mildly.
Yeah.
Competent is being nice.
Maybe a place to leave it in the clouds for that. You know, I think pertinent questions that we need to be thinking about as we think and getting into a new year where things are definitely going to probably, change and continue to morph. But we want to thank you for being part of this conversation with us this morning. Josephat Munyana Josephat Kamanya is a political analyst and he's been our guest this hour. Looking at the year in review, what does it have in store for us as we come into a new year? Thanks for being a part of Kenya's biggest conversation this entire week. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk again soon.